So I want to start with a personal and actually pretty embarrassing story. Recently, I was at a hospital that I've never been to, and because it was in Pittsburgh and because of the new COVID protocols, it was different than what I was used to. And as soon as I walked through the first set of doors, I entered a vestibule. And that's that passage area from the first entrance from the outside to another set of doors to the inside. It's almost like a hallway type place between two sets of doors. So anyway, I'm in this vestibule, and even though I wasn't technically inside, I could still see inside because the whole second entrance was this big glass wall. And as I stood there, I noticed that the glass door never opened for me to go inside. And when I had walked through the first set of doors from the outside, all I had to do was stand there, and they automatically opened for me. But for some reason, when I was in this vestibule, that wasn't happening now. But then I noticed a sign that said, "Please stand back." And it dawned on me that probably because of COVID, only one group at a time was allowed to be on that other side of glass wall. So it made sense to me that I had to stand back and probably 6 feet back due to the COVID 6-foot distance rule. So I obeyed the "please stand back" sign, and I watched through the glass as a group in front of me went through a metal detector at the security check-in. But after that group went through and there were no other people but just me on the other side of that glass wall, waiting patiently, waiting for the security guard to let me in, nothing happened. My door still didn't open. In fact, the security guard didn't even notice me at first. But there I stood for a while, actually, standing and standing and standing, staring at a wall that never moved. Finally, the security guard looked up. He looked confused when he saw me standing there, like he didn't even know why I was there. Didn't he know that I just needed him to open up that door for me? At last, his eyes seemed to register what was going on, and I thought, he'll finally let me in. But the wall in front of me still never moved. Instead, the security guard, looking somewhere between annoyed and amused, made this signal. He did this. So I moved over where he was pointing, and funny thing, when I stepped about 2 feet to my left, a door magically opened. That door that I thought was in front of me, it was just a wall. It was never going to open. The only door was to my left. I'd been standing in front of a wall that entire time that was right next to a door. And that "please stand back" sign that I thought I had to obey because of COVID, it was just a warning that is put on every single automatic sliding door. You have probably seen them, and it's to warn people that an automatic sliding door will be going open. I had been completely standing in the wrong place, staring at a wall that I couldn't get through, and all I needed to do was move for the actual door to open. And this story's funny and embarrassing, especially since my dad was parking the car and he drove by and saw me standing there like a complete fool and wondering why on earth his daughter was just standing in a vestibule staring at a glass wall. But I wanted to share this story because it reminds me of us spiritually. We're standing in front of these walls in our life, hoping for a breakthrough, wondering why we can't get to the other side, why the wall won't come down, why the door doesn't seem to be opening. We're standing in the vestibule, waiting for a breakthrough, and it just isn't coming. But this evening, we're going to examine if we are standing in the right place. Because what if God has a door he wants to open for us, but we just aren't budging from where we are standing? And that we think a breakthrough can only happen if it happens where we think, when we think. And so we wait and wait and wait. But what if a breakthrough can happen in your life, just differently than you might have thought, maybe through a different door? My dad saw me and knew exactly where I needed to go. And we have a heavenly dad who knows exactly where we need to go and how to move and what door he is calling us through. It's only when we listen to him as he signals to us, much like that security guard, that we can receive a breakthrough. So tonight, we're going to be looking at 3 different women in the Bible who received a breakthrough. Through their stories, we will learn that to receive a breakthrough in our own lives, we have to first go through that first set of doors. Then we have to be ready in the vestibule. And then finally, stand back. Get out of the way and allow God to open the right door. We're going to start with a story that comes from the New Testament in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 13, where we're introduced to our first woman, a woman who has been waiting for a breakthrough for 18 years. 18 years. Verse 11 tells us her situation. She had been crippled by a spirit for 18 years. She was completely bent over and could not straighten up at all. For 18 years, she has been crippled. For 18 years, she has been completely bent over, unable to straighten up, which means she couldn't look forward and she couldn't look upward. All she could see was the dirt at her feet. She was disabled, embarrassed, rejected, robbed of her dignity, and bound by a spirit who had chained her up in a crippling state. If anyone needed a breakthrough, it was this woman. And it was likely she heard about the Jesus who made the lame walk, who gave sight to the blind, and who drove spirits out of the tormented. And she had to have had some hope, some thought that if anyone could help her, it would be him. But she probably didn't expect healing on the day this story took place. Because if we back up and look at verse 10 and see the very first line of the story, it begins with this. On the Sabbath, Jesus was teaching in one of the synagogues. Did you catch that first phrase, on the Sabbath? Out of the entire Bible, we hear about this woman once, and it's on the day of the Sabbath. A day where just to do about anything was to break the strict Jewish law enforced at that time, including healing anyone or being healed. Now, the initial purpose of the Sabbath was to alleviate burdens, but through the years, the Sabbath law morphed into this slew of rules that ended up not easing burdens, but increasing them. The Sabbath restrictions became this overwhelming list that included things like no writing, erasing, or tearing, no conducting business transactions, no shopping, cooking, baking, or kindling a fire, no gardening, doing laundry, that'd be nice, no moving anything with your hand, even indirectly, like moving a rock or even a button that had fallen off. If you needed to move things, you had to use your elbow or even your breath. And this is just a partial list. The rules went on and on. So who would ever hope to be healed on the Sabbath? That would just be crazy, and also a death wish, because the Jewish people knew that the Old Testament clearly stated that breaking the Sabbath law was punishable by death. So that day, on the Sabbath, was out of the question for this woman to be healed. If she wanted Jesus to help her, it would have to happen on another day. But I love how the story continues. On the Sabbath, Jesus was teaching in one of the synagogues, and a woman was there. A woman was there. She still came. Even if it was the Sabbath, even if Jesus couldn't heal her that day, even if she had no chance of her situation changing, even if she walked in bent over or left there bent over, she still came. Why? If she couldn't be healed that day? Because Jesus was there. She went to be with Jesus. She walked through the doors of that synagogue so she could simply be near Jesus. Maybe a breakthrough in her condition wouldn't happen that day, but she didn't let it stop her from entering those synagogue doors so she could be with him. And it couldn't have been easy. She had to walk through the streets to get there. And the streets to a synagogue would have been highly populated with people coming and going, which meant this woman couldn't hide. She couldn't avoid people. People probably mocked her as she passed by, and she wouldn't have been able to see anybody as she was completely bent over, and yet she had to feel their disdain and their rejection and felt them step back away from her, calling her unclean. But she still made her way to the synagogue and walked through those doors, even if nothing would happen while she was there. And you know, in that story I told you in the beginning about me standing in front of that glass wall, we can't overlook that before I even got into the vestibule, I had to first go through the outside doors. And this woman knew that if she wanted to see Jesus, then she must go through the outside synagogue doors. Because if we aren't willing to even go through the first set of doors to get to Jesus, then how can we ever expect changes in our life or breakthroughs to ever happen? How can we ever expect walls to come down if we aren't even willing to step inside? If we want a breakthrough, then we have to step in and get close to Jesus. The closer we get to Jesus is always a closer step to a breakthrough. And that means that we have to first enter those outside doors. And entering the first set of doors means entering into relationship with Christ. It means making a choice to go to Jesus. It means to no longer be on the outside of faith, to no longer be on the outside of God's will for your life or what he wants for you. It's instead making the decision to finally step into where God is calling you, to a deeper faith and a closer relationship with him. And this might look differently for each one of us. See, some of us are standing outside because we're in complete disobedience. We know the right thing to do, yet we aren't willing to do it. Or we stay outside and don't step in because we're afraid to trust. Or maybe for someone here tonight, it's because you haven't even made the decision yet to follow the Lord and give your heart to him. And even though our reason for staying outside might be different, the same is true for all of us, that a door is open. Maybe it's only 2 feet away from you, or maybe it feels like miles away, but a door is there. And that door is there and available for one reason and one reason alone, because of Jesus dying on the cross for us. Because he did, the wall between us and him was torn down. And now we can enter through that door and into a relationship with him. It's the greatest breakthrough we will ever receive in our lives. It's a breakthrough from sin to unconditional forgiveness. A breakthrough from shame to redemption. A breakthrough from rejection to acceptance. And a breakthrough from emptiness to completeness. And even though that door is there, and that we can receive that forgiveness and that redemption and that completeness and that acceptance from Christ, we still question going inside. The work has been done. The door can automatically slide open for us, and yet we still choose to stay out in the cold, dark, and even scary outside, willing to miss the biggest breakthrough of our lives. Why? because at least we know what to expect out there, because we think we know better, or because we don't really understand. So we either linger completely outside, or sometimes we'll put one foot in and one foot out, not really wanting to say, okay, I'll go all in. But meanwhile, that automatic door just keeps sliding open over and over again, this constant invitation calling to us. And this crippled woman had no idea what to expect if she stepped through that door, but she still made the decision to go inside. I mean, if she didn't, this story would be pretty sad, pretty boring to even tell. You wouldn't be interested if I told you about a story about a woman who suffered for 18 years, but because it was the Sabbath, she chose not to go. She missed her chance to be with Jesus. It's a pretty depressing story. But what about your story? If you don't walk through that door, it will be just as sad, if not more. What if your story told about a woman who was suffering and needing hope and needing love, and Jesus died for you so that a door could be open for you to come inside and be with him? But because you didn't know what to expect, because you were unsure or disobedient, you stayed outside and never walked through the door. Don't let that be your story. And thankfully, it wasn't this woman's story. She walked through those doors. And listen to what happened because the woman did. Verse 12 tells us, when Jesus saw her, he called her forward. There were others there besides her, others who weren't disabled, others who could stand up straight. And because this woman was completely bent over, she had to have looked hidden among the crowd. But even with all those other people there, it was her that Jesus saw, and it was her that he called forward. But if he called her forward to heal her, she could be risking her life. She'd be breaking those Sabbath rules. She could just walk away, pretend she didn't hear him. No one would notice her anyway. No one ever did unless they were going to make fun of her. But she didn't walk away. Instead, she walked toward Jesus. And I imagine her taking those first steps, timid, unsure. Maybe she felt humiliated because she had to walk through yet another crowd. Or maybe it didn't go that way at all. Maybe she didn't care what others thought because all she could feel was the love and the compassion from Jesus, and she only wanted to get to him. Either way, we know she made her way there. We know she went to Jesus. And because she did, Jesus said to her, verse 12 again, "Dear woman, you are healed of your sickness." She was healed. But it was the Sabbath. He healed her on the Sabbath. Imagine the chaos that erupted, the gasping from the crowd, the church leaders furious, rushing forward, yelling that this wasn't allowed. But even in that chaos, something beautiful was going on. Verse 13 says, "Then Jesus touched her, and instantly she could straighten up." How she praised God. The synagogue was in an uproar, the leaders furious, the people probably afraid. But amidst all of that was one woman who once was considered untouchable, was now being touched by the Savior of the world. Who once was bent over was now standing completely straight. Who once couldn't look anyone in the eyes was now looking into the eyes of her healer. She had been a woman who couldn't even raise her hands because she was too crippled. And now she had her hands raised high, outstretched in complete praise and adoration. She was set free. She was healed. She was touched. and she was changed. And all of that happened on the Sabbath, a day she would have never expected for a breakthrough. But it was possible because she went through the first set of doors to be near Jesus. If she never went through those doors, she wouldn't have been there to receive the breakthrough. And you might be like that woman tonight, bent over in pain, bent over in problems, in despair or sorrow, maybe crippled by fear and anxiety, stooped over because of a loss in your life, because something happened in your past. And the weight of it all can make you feel like you don't even know how to face anyone. You can't look anyone in the eye. You're embarrassed by your situation. Or you're in so much pain from your current circumstance that you don't even really want to be around anyone. A breakthrough seems impossible. But Jesus is waiting for you inside those doors. He sees you. Even with everyone else in the world, you are not hidden from him. He sees you. The woman bent over. The woman who's been suffering for years. The woman who might be bound by sin and shame. He sees you. And he's asking you to come to him with your pain, with your grief and that situation that's weighing so heavy on your heart. And no matter how hard things are for you right now, don't walk away. Walk through those first set of doors and allow him to touch your heart, because he can straighten up your life. He can unmangle your heart. You don't have to be bent over anymore in pain with all that you're carrying around. But you have to first walk through the door. He is calling you inside, out of the cold and into the light. And I know it's hard to take those first steps, and maybe you're hesitating to take those first steps. You feel timid or unsure. But it doesn't matter how you go to him. It only matters that you go to him and that you make your way toward him and decide tonight to follow him no matter what, no matter your circumstance and no matter your past. Just step in. Step into a relationship with him. Step into his presence tonight. Step into the greatest breakthrough of your life. There is no better story that you can have than tells about how you walked through those doors and straight into your Savior's embrace. So, do you want a breakthrough? Do you want a story like that? Then walk through the first set of doors, because Jesus has opened it and is waiting for you. Before we continue our messages, Chris is going to lead us in a song that talks about giving our heart and lives to Jesus. And if you're here and you've never given your heart to the Lord, tonight's an opportunity to do so. Pray these words that he sings. He's going to say words like, I give you my life. I give you my trust. My heart is yours. Surrender your life to him as you hear those words and you see the words on the screen. Don't let the moment pass you by, because Jesus is calling you to him right now, right here. So let's stand and praise God like the crippled woman did, with our hands and our hearts outstretched.